What the hell even is noun gender? Well, nouns in many languages are somewhat arbitrarily assigned a gender. For example, in Italian, a table is always masculine and a window is always feminine. In this short video, I'm going to explain a little bit more about what that means in real life and some tricks on how you can remember what gender applies to what thing. So let's get started. So what does noun gender actually look like in real life? Well, primarily it affects two key things: articles, things like the and a, and pronouns, things like he, she, and it. For example, take the sentence, I am closing the window. In Italian, you would still say, I am closing the window, but you would use the feminine form of the, which is la, as opposed to the masculine version, which is il. So far, so simple. But if instead we ask somebody else to close the window for us and issue a command and just say, hey, close it, then it suddenly gets a bit weirder. Because here, instead of saying close it, in Italian you actually literally say close her, which sounds very, very strange to native English speakers. Now, unfortunately, getting this right is reasonably important because every Italian in the world, for instance, knows that a window is female. And so if you were to say close him, then they might get a little bit confused as to what you mean. Now, added to this, there are some languages that take this much more seriously than others. Take German, for instance. In German, there are actually three genders. There's masculine, feminine, and neutral. And the nouns are assigned a gender almost completely arbitrarily. You have to just literally learn that a spoon is masculine and a car is neutral. But then you get languages like Italian, which are actually much more forgiving, because in Italian, almost every masculine word ends in an O, and almost every feminine word ends in an A, which makes it really easy to tell which one is which. So a good way to get to grips with all this sort of stuff for your target language is to just hit up the Wikipedia page for the grammar of the language you are interested in. So for example, if I go to the page for French grammar and I scroll down to nouns, then it will give me information on how many genders there are and how arbitrarily or systematically nouns are assigned a gender. So how do we actually learn noun genders? How do we get these things into our head and begin to associate the idea of spoons with being masculine? Well, as an English native speaker, I have always found this really, really weird. And it always strikes me as something that seems to have been deliberately invented to confuse English speakers. Now, two bits of advice I often hear are A, to always learn the gender and the noun itself together. So if you meet something new for the first time, don't just write down Auto equals car, write down das Auto, neutral, equals the car. And the second piece of advice is to listen really intently to native speakers and try and be very aware of the genders that they are using, notice them, log them, and then try and copy what they're saying. Now, these are both very good bits of advice, but if I could add something of my own, then I would suggest trying to think of genders as colours. I personally find it much easier to think of a chair as being green rather than as being feminine. And so whenever I come across feminine words, when I was learning French, for instance, I would underline them in green. And then when I went to write some flashcards later, I would always label feminine nouns as being green. Now, I actually found this quite helpful, and it seemed to trick my English-speaking brain into learning noun gender, even though it really wasn't built for it. Now, over time, you won't need this colour system anymore because you'll begin to just know that a chair is feminine because you've used that word so many times. But to start off with, I did find it super helpful, so I would recommend that you give it a go if you're struggling with noun genders. So there we have it, a very rough introduction, very brief introduction to noun genders, but hopefully it's enough to give you an idea of the concept and what we're talking about and arm you to go out and do a little bit more research about your target language. Before I go, I want to let you know that I'm actually making a whole series of these grammatical introduction videos, as well as putting out language learning content every week right here on my YouTube channel. So if you're not already, then hit that subscribe button and I'll catch you on the next video.